On this channel, we talk about all kinds of topics relating to religion. We talk about specific religions and their history and their teachings. We talk about incredibly niche topics and figures within different religions. But one rather important thing that most of us don't really do much is ask a deceptively simple question: what is religion? Some of you listening might immediately have some answer to this question. Religion is belief in God or gods. Religions are organized structures of worship. Religion is opium for the masses and whatever. But don't be fooled. This is actually one of the hardest questions that we can ask as serious students of religion, and a question that no one seems capable of fully answering. The blunt fact is, there is no official agreed-upon definition of religion in scholarship or academia. I'll repeat that. There is no official agreed-upon definition of the word religion. You can look up the word in a dictionary all you want, but all you'll find is usually a half-baked problematic definition that most scholars probably won't agree with. Religion is a fascinating thing because it is a concept that everyone kind of knows what it is. When we talk about religion, we all essentially know what it is that we're talking about, but as soon as we get down to actually defining it properly, things start to fall apart. Now, that isn't to say that people haven't tried to define it. Certainly they have, and they still do. There have been plenty of attempts to define religion or of figuring out what religion is all about. An early example is the anthropologist Edward B. Tyler, who defined religion as, quote, belief in supernatural beings, a definition that most of you might not find any issue with, but which actually comes with a lot of problems. Not only does it look at religion from a very Christian or specifically Protestant perspective, a point that we will return to later, but it also betrays a very strong bias. This is also confirmed when reading Tyler more closely and realizing that his argument is essentially that all religious beliefs appeared as failed attempts to explain natural phenomena. Another rather outdated perspective that isn't very helpful in exploring the history of religion and religious belief. More influential were other thinkers from the same period, like Emil Durkheim and Max Weber, who provided two different yet pervasive ways of looking at religion. Weber saw religion as more of a psychological phenomenon, as essentially the human attempt of creating meaning in a seemingly meaningless world. It becomes like a coping strategy to deal with difficult questions like death and the meaning of life. Durkheim, on the other hand, saw religion essentially as a social phenomenon. Religion, its symbols, its structures, and all its rituals serve to create a sense of social belonging, of strengthening group identity and organization. To Durkheim and those following his line of thought, religious symbols like gods or totems function in similar ways to, say, a national flag. They are symbols under which a group of people can unite and which can increase and authenticate their sense of belonging and identity. This is a very powerful and helpful perspective, and this kind of behavior can be confirmed in experiments, etc. But it still comes with a lot of problems of its own too. If religion is nothing but symbols of group belonging, then what makes a religion different from nationality? Is Americanism a religion? Is football or soccer a religion? They all have symbols and practices under which a group of people unite to create and strengthen group belonging, so that should make them religions, right? But most people wouldn't define them as religions. These are the kind of problems that scholars to this day are struggling with when we try to define the word religion. But thinkers like Durkheim and Weber did one thing much better than a person like Tyler, and that was to include the importance of practice and performance. Indeed, in my opinion, as well as in the opinion of many scholars in the field, religion is much more about what we do rather than the things we believe. Religions are performed and embodied through practices that continually shape and create that religion. Research shows that even in a specific thing like rituals, the performing of the ritual itself comes first, and the theory or symbolic meaning of the ritual is secondary. In other words, we as creatures do things first, and we rationalize our actions after the fact rather than the other way around. This seems to go against how we perceive how these things go, but there is a lot to suggest that it is indeed so. Now, building on the work of people like Weber and Durkheim, there have been many scholars over the last century who have continually improved and studied this topic deeper to allow for new perspectives. Some famous examples include the American anthropologist Clifford Geertz, who followed more in the line of Max Weber but gave us one of the most celebrated and quoted definitions of religion in scholarship. This one's pretty good actually as far as these things go. Geertz defines religion in the following way, quote, "A religion is a system of symbols which act to establish powerful, pervasive, and long-lasting moods in men by formulating conceptions of a general order of existence and clothing those conceptions with such an aura of factuality that the moods and motivations seem uniquely realistic." As you can tell, there is a lot of Weber's meaning-creating perspective here, but it is formulated in a more developed way. This definition of Geertz, of what religion is still used sometimes today. There are those who criticize it, especially for perhaps not including that social aspect that for the followers of people like Durkheim emphasize so much. But generally, this is a rather liked definition of religion that is one of the most popular around. Another more recent example is in the work of Abby Day, who, in an attempt to talk about how religion functions, coined the term believing in belonging. That people primarily believe in their social belonging and identity. That, much like Durkheim argues, religion and belief is primarily interested in creating and maintaining social belonging and identity formation. This idea is further supported by her research, in which she can show and argue that belief is mainly a question of performative identity formation and social relationships. So as you can tell, there are many different perspectives on how one can properly answer the question, what is religion? Another very important perspective that needs to be kept in mind is the fact that the term religion, as we understand it, is a Western concept and very much colored by that context. This means that when we understand what religion is and interpret other religions, we do so from a Western framework. The whole concept of how we understand religion is born out of a Christian environment, and thus our whole view of quote-unquote religion is heavily colored by Christianity. So when we, and indeed many scholars in the past and present, try to study, define, and understand religions other than Christianity, we do so based on a Christian-centric framework. We assume that other quote-unquote religions, if they can even be called that, follow the same model of Christianity. And if they don't, then we try to fit them into that framework, sometimes forcibly. This Christian framework includes many things, but often 2 or 3 very specific features. The religion has a founder, the religion has a sacred scripture, and the religion has a creed or established theology. Have you ever read a textbook about religions that try to explain non-Christian religions through this framework? I'm sure you have, and this can be a huge problem. Cultures are different and religions are very different. If we look at a religion like Hinduism, which first of all could be argued not to be a single religion at all, and we try to apply this Christian framework to it, it doesn't really work at all. It simplifies things to a huge degree. We often see people try to say that the Veda scriptures are the Bible of the Hindus, but this isn't accurate at all. It functions in a very different way. And this is a mistake that we often make when we talk about religions. They don't all fit into a single mold. They're all infinitely complex and different from each other, and to call them all quote-unquote religions brings a lot of these problems with it, even though we shouldn't necessarily give up doing that completely. Even in a religion that is relatively close to Christianity in both origins and structure, like Islam, we can easily make the same mistakes. Seemingly, it fits rather well into that previous framework. It has a founder, it seems, Muhammad, and it has a sacred scripture, the Quran. But to compare Muhammad to Jesus in Christianity, or the Quran with the Bible, creates a fundamental misunderstanding about the similarities and differences between these religions. In fact, if any comparison should be made at all, it would be more accurate to compare the role of Jesus in Christianity to the role of the Quran in Islam. Muhammad, by comparison, could perhaps be thought of as having the same role or a similar role to the Virgin Mary in Christianity. This stuff is a minefield. Even such seemingly accurate comparisons can lead to fundamental misunderstanding. So we should always keep this in mind and understand that religions are very different, and we can't apply a single framework or model onto religions other than Christianity without thinking any further about it. This phenomenon also becomes very apparent when you ask people to define what religion is. Many people here in the so-called West will often reply that religion is essentially about believing in God or some kind of superhuman force, or at least that this is a central part of what religion is. Even a seasoned scholar like Edward B. Tyler made this mistake, as we saw. But again, this is a very specifically Christian and even more so Protestant perspective on religion. Protestantism teaches that it is the individual person's personal inner belief that matters, and not so much outer actions or rituals, and this heavily influences our understanding of what religion is supposed to mean. But if you go outside a Protestant context to the Middle East or India or any other place, you will find that perhaps very different things are emphasized. Perhaps religion is more about practical things, following certain laws, acting a certain way as a human being. Maybe it's about family, maybe it's about charity, the list goes on. Religion can be many different things to different people, and we can't be chained to a particular cultural perspective in our understanding of such a broad concept. Here in the West, we today have confined religion to its own place in society. We have clearly defined borders and pockets for different aspects of our lives. Over here is politics, over here is culture, over there is entertainment, and over here is religion. Religion has a specific place that is, as just pointed out, often confined to personal belief, and these different categories of society shouldn't meet, at least ideally, should be kept in their own pockets. And not only is this a very modern and new way of looking at religion or society, a way that does not correspond to the way it worked historically or in many parts of the world even today, but it can also skew our understanding of how religions function today at all in different parts of the world. I'm sure many of you have heard the argument, well, that isn't part of the religion, that's part of the culture. Well, is there necessarily a difference? The scholar Talal Asad didn't think so. He argued that the idea that religion and culture are two separate things is a modern invention. The seemingly arbitrary categories of religion and culture are infinitely intertwined and at times can be one and the same thing. Just look at a religion like Islam. Islam in Morocco looks very different from Islam as practiced in Indonesia. Why is this? Well, some might chalk it up to culture. You could say that's definitely true to some degree, but to see religion as one thing and then culture as another, that one influences the other, is that really an accurate picture? One could look at it that way, but I think that it's a very surface level and shallow view of the reality of the situation. In reality, the borders or lines between these two categories are very fuzzy because a religion does not exist independently of the people who perform it and the context or culture in which it exists. The two become unified into a single thing. And this leads us to what is perhaps the most important point that needs to be kept in mind when we study religions, an inescapable fact that cannot be escaped, that religions are internally diverse, and that they change over time and place. No religion is immune from this. All religions are diverse and multifaceted. There always exists a multitude of interpretations and understandings. Some say there are as many versions of a religion as there are adherents to that religion. And the second point is also important, that religions always evolve and change. The people who continually create and perform the religion are shaping it in new ways and adapting to new situations and contexts, whether they know it or not. The main point is, we like to look at the world of religions as a set of fixed, religions that believe certain things, practice certain ways, but this is a hugely oversimplified view of the situation. All religions are almost infinitely diverse and exist in many forms. The borders that separate all these kinds of concepts are very fuzzy, and these perspectives that we have talked about needs to be kept in mind as we go forward and try to get a better idea of how religions work and function in society, both historically and today. So now I hope you understand why asking a question like, what is religion, can become pretty complicated, and that answers to that question can vary a lot depending on who you ask and in what context. It adds more nuance and complexity to this topic, which was complex enough to begin with, but it's an important perspective to have in mind as we study religion from an academic and neutral scholarly perspective, which is what we aim for on this channel. You don't have to agree with everything I've said here. That's the whole point. This is an ongoing discussion about how we define terms, how we understand the things in a broad sense, to understand the very concepts that we're trying to study. But this is an introduction into some of the debates and discussions that are had within religious studies about this specific question. I would like to thank all of my patrons as usual for the invaluable support that you give me. And also a thank you to everyone who watches and likes and subscribes to this channel in general. I'll see you next time.